Hi everyone, this is Mrs. Freege, and this week we are going to continue our study of angle relationships, starting today with lesson 8.3, vertical angles. We have two learning targets for our lesson today. The first one, I can identify and describe vertical angles. The second, I can use vertical angles to help find the measures of missing angles. So as we go through today's lesson, the question I want you to keep in mind is this. How can you use vertical angles to find unknown angle measures? So before we dig into vertical angles, let's do a quick review of complementary and supplementary angles. So this is the angle relationship work that we did last week. You'll remember that complementary angles are two angles that add up to 90 degrees. So in a complementary angle, the two angles add up to 90. So here we have 45 plus 45 would give us our 90. We also studied supplementary angles. Supplementary angles are two angles that add up to 180 degrees. So here in this picture, we have two angles. The first one is 100 degrees. The second is 80 degrees. So together they are supplementary. They add up to 180. We are going to be able to, or going to need to use supplementary angles today as well to help us. So I want to make sure that we remember specifically that supplementary add up to 180. So our new learning for today is this idea of vertical angles. So what are vertical angles? So vertical angles are two angles that are actually formed when two different lines intersect. So you can see there's one diagonal line here and another diagonal line here, and they intersect right here at this point. That creates four separate angles, right? One on the top, one on the bottom, one on the left, one on the right. And these angles have a special relationship. They are congruent. And congruent is a mathematical word for equal to each other. So if you look up here, this angle is 120 degrees. The angle directly across from it is also 120 degrees because they're congruent. They are the same measurement. Now, if you look at this angle over here, this angle is 60 degrees. So the other vertical angle directly across from that is also going to be 60 degrees. Okay, so this one, you don't really have to do much math. You just have to remember that opposite angles when they're vertical are congruent or equal to each other. Okay, so let's take a look at an example. Here we go. So here is one. Two lines below intersect at point P. Find the measure of the missing angles. So because we have our two intersecting lines here, we have two pairs of vertical angles. And in this picture, they've given us the measure of one angle, 35 degrees, and it wants us to find angle X, Y, and Z. So I'm going to start with the easiest one first, because if this angle is 35 degrees, then the angle that is vertical, which is directly across, is also going to be the same measure. So angle X is going to be 35 degrees. Now remember I told you earlier we're going to have to use our relationship of supplementary. So let me show you really quickly here. This is a perfectly, if I can trace it right, perfectly straight line here, right? So if you tilt your head a little bit to the right, you can see that this is a perfectly straight line here, okay? Which means it's 180 degrees. So if I know that this angle here is 35 degrees, and I want to figure out what this angle Y is, I'm just going to subtract from 180 because together these two angles add up to 180 degrees. So if I take 180 and I subtract 35 from it, that's going to leave me with 145 degrees. Okay, so angle Y is 145 degrees. Now watch how easy this is. If this angle is 145 degrees, Angle Z is a vertical angle. It's directly across, which means that this angle Z is also going to be 145 degrees. Okay, so here we had to use vertical angles and also what we know about supplementary angles to find all of those missing angles. Okay, let's try another one. So take a look at this example. Two lines below intersect at point P. Find the measure of the missing angles. So really quickly, I want you to do the easiest one first. Tell me the measure of angle M. Good, so most of you probably said 115 degrees, right? And that was kind of an easy one because we know that vertical angles, angles that are across from each other, are equal to each other. They're congruent. So that one was an easy one. So now I need to find N and P. In order to do that, I have to remember that these angles are supplementary. And like I said, here again, you can tilt your head a little bit. I wish I had my camera on so you could see me. Tilt your head a little bit to the right and you can see that they make a straight line. So if angle M is 115 degrees, we have to figure out what P would be, or we could figure out N. So I'm going to do 180, and I'm going to take away 115. And when I subtract those, I'm going to get 65. All right, so that means that this angle P, and I didn't go in order, but that's okay. Angle P is 65 degrees. Fill that in over here. Now, again, this is easy because we know vertical angles are equal to each other. So if angle P over here is 65, what's going to be the measure of angle N? Go ahead and see what you think. Good, most of you knew that was going to be 65. So I always like to label my angle measurements right on my diagram because sometimes I have to come back and use them again. But I'm also going to put my answer over here. Okay, so 65 degrees. Let's move on. Check this one out. Two lines below intersect at point P. Find the measure of the missing angles. So again, here we have 45 degrees. Vertical angle is right across, angle H. Go ahead right now, type in the measure for angle H. Good, most of you said 45, which is completely correct. So now we need to figure out what J and K are. All right, if we can figure out J or K, we can figure out the other one because they're vertical as well. So I know here, I'll use this supplementary angle, forms a 180-degree angle, and I already have 45. So if I take 180 and subtract 45, go ahead and see what you get for the measures of J and K. So put in your final answers for the measure of angle J and angle K. Okay, so if you subtracted here correctly, you would have gotten 135 degrees, which means that if K was 135 degrees, J is also 135 degrees because they are vertical. Okay, let's try one more. I'm going to have you try this one pretty much on your own. Okay, so we have one angle marked here, 121 degrees, and it wants us to find the measures of angles X, Y, and Z. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do is find the measure of angle X. Go ahead, do that on your own now. See what you come up with. Good. Most of you said 121 degrees. Absolutely right, because those are vertical angles, so they are congruent. So the next thing I'm going to ask you to do is show me how you would find the measures of angles Y and Z. Show me all of your steps and make sure that you include your final answer. All right, let's see how you did. So you should have started with 180. right? And you could use this supplementary angle here, or you could use y over here because they both form a straight line. And subtract from it 121. And when you subtract those, you should get 59 degrees, right? And if this is 59 degrees, then we know that this is 59 degrees. And so we can come over here and fill those in as well. And like I said, it's important to put them right on the diagram because then you can kind of keep track of which angles you've already found. Okay. All right. So hopefully you were able to get that one correct. Let's close up here by just kind of reviewing our learning targets. So today's lesson was really about identifying and describing what vertical angles are. And then after we figured out what they were, then how can we use those to find the measures of some missing angles? So some important things that we covered today are first that vertical angles are formed by two intersecting lines, right? Two lines that cross each other. And vertical angles have a relationship where they are congruent. So angles that are across from each other, that are vertical, they are equal. And then we went through some steps to find some unknown angles. So to find unknown angles formed by two intersecting lines, we can use angle relationships. So it really doesn't matter what order that you do them in, but it is important to remember that when you're dealing with supplementary relationship, the angles add up to 180. And when you're dealing with vertical angle relationships, those angles are actually equal to each other. So today we have another angle pair or angle relationship for you to remember, in addition to complementary and supplementary. And hopefully this helps you with the remainder of this week's activities. You want to say hello?
Yeah, meeting.
All right, guys, have a good rest of your day. I will talk to you soon.